can be the cat, baby, you can be the mouse. We can laugh off things that we know nothing about. We can go forever until you wanna sit it out.
And Mr. Kaster called me about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and asked me if Veronica had made it, and I said no. And I asked him if Eddie had.
Yeah.
Because I only saw Rachel's paperwork.
Right.
And he said no.
God.
So that's how we told each other they were all dead.
Right. My God.
I just want to quickly welcome back all listeners. This is the Dark Taboo Show. Today's episode is number 10. It's the Golf and Stuff murders, the Kaster and Flores case. Before we move on into the video, guys, I just want to say a quick thank you and express my gratitude to all recent subscribers on the channel. I didn't expect it to grow this much. When I first made it, I anticipated maybe like 20, 30 people would follow. But currently I'm sitting at over 190. So I really do appreciate it. And a thank you to each and every one of you. And if you happen to be listening to this on an audio format, a thank you to you as well. Whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever platform you find this on, I really do appreciate the follow, a like, a comment, a review, whatever it happens to be. I really do appreciate it. So yeah, thank you guys again. And this is episode 10. Today we learn of the tragic case of the Golf and Stuff murders, also known as the Kaster and Flores case. How can a night that was just supposed to be innocent fun between 3 friends take such a dark turn? How can a father drop off his kids and their friend to enjoy the night, only to later return and find a homicide investigation underway? And how can a setting of so much fun and happiness shift so quickly to one of horror? A brutal and barbaric attack that left 3 innocent teenagers slain and left a wake of devastation and pain till this day, 41 years later. To who committed these atrocities, rumors and speculations would fly of an infamous serial killer at the time, schoolmates, and even Satanists. And even though years and time has passed, the community has never forgotten, and families have never forgotten. A cold case that still remains open to this day with Downey and Norwalk PD. In the similar theme of the last video, having personal ties with myself, the setting of this next case has those same elements. Just for some quick context, Golf and Stuff in Norwalk, California holds a dear place in my heart, and it's quite famous and loved within the community. Having appeared in the TV show Chips, it's a 1980 series about motorcycle police. Also, it famously appeared in the original Karate Kid when Daniel LaRusso, actor Ralph Macchio, goes on his first date with Allie, actress Elizabeth Shue. The two would famously end up at Golf and Stuff in a great scene that would exude youthfulness with innocent fun and the joy of teenage life and love. It also appears again in the 2017 Karate Kid spin-off Netflix series Cobra Kai. And having my cousins live in Norwalk and being with them constantly growing up, I ended up at Golf and Stuff more times than I could count. It's a small but packed property, primarily a mini golf course, but back in the 80s it had a small water park segment that no longer exists today, along with various other rides that have stood up to the test of time and are still running, just like the bumper boats and most famously a go-kart track called Little Indies. The property also has a large arcade full of games, all catering towards children and teenagers. I actually had my own 13th birthday party celebration there. I remember I ate pizza, I mini golfed with my friends, I rode the go-kart track at Little Indies with my cousins, and having gone there with my dad and played countless rounds of mini golf and having such great memories, learning of a brutal tragedy that took place there always sounded unbelievable. And as a child, you're naive. You have a certain sense of innocence to the dangers and the darkness of the real world. And only as I grew older, and way before I was ever into true crime, my mom would tell me a story of a gruesome attack that happened to someone she went to school with at golf and stuff. And I remember almost never believing it. She told me it happened in the riverbed next to the property. And considering the idea I had in my head of the place, having so much fun growing up, it truly did sound unbelievable to me. When she would describe the story in details, they were something out of a horror movie, and it left an impression with me way back then and even up until now. And full circle, now that I've grown older and I find myself in the unique position of making true crime content, I was instantly drawn back to this case, the one I remembered my mom would talk about. My main motivation with this work is to begin to hopefully shine a light and inform those that may not know the story of what happened at Golf and Stuff, and what truly happened to 3 innocent teenagers that tragic evening. On the Friday night of April 13th, 1984, Gary Kaster dropped off 3 children, his daughter, Rachel Kaster, 18, Eddie Kaster, 15, and their schoolmate and friend, Veronica Flores, age 17, off at the Golf and Stuff. The property sat just on the border of the city of Downey and the city of Norwalk. Mr. Kaster had left the 3 kids and had strict orders for them to be picked up at a prearranged time, that being midnight. Eddie Kaster, Rachel Kaster, and Veronica Flores were all prepared for a night of fun. The 3 had been schoolmates at Southgate High School, and all 3 were close friends. Rachel was set to graduate that coming June and was known as a model student, as well as young Eddie, who was never known to have any issues or problems with anybody. But 17-year-old Veronica Flores, on the other hand, seemed to have her own personal issues and social issues that she was working through. And just like any teenager or young adult, it can often be a tumultuous time in life. And Veronica had her own set of circumstances that she was dealing with. One being that she suffered from a slight learning disability, and 2, she seemed to have some sort of conflict with other students at Southgate High School. The word circulating was that a group of other students on the campus at Southgate High had an issue with Veronica, going as far as having had verbal altercations all the way up to having physical ones. The exact reasons for these problems were never fully known or said by investigators, leaving it up to theories and word of mouth. But as time went on, events after this tragedy would unfold and more suspicion would be raised as to the severity of the problem between her and her classmates. Veronica, from those who knew her, was described as a loving, wild, free person, a great friend, and a great and loving sister.
We met, but I remember the first time seeing her, I'm thinking, she had some beautiful brown, long hair, and I thought, wow, she's pretty. I said, I wonder if she's gonna want to be my friend. And she did. I mean, we got along good from the beginning. It was like we were meant to be friends.
She was?
She was just so sweet. She was always singing, that I remember. She had the most beautiful voice, her smile. She had a dimple. Her dimple was every time she smiled, it was just like really nice.
But on top of some of the issues she faced at her school with other students, she was also 4.5 months pregnant and just 17 years old, trying to navigate the road of life. She was about to get married to her boyfriend and move to a nearby apartment, and after dealing with a group of students who seemed intent on making her life miserable, she would eventually transfer from Southgate High to Odyssey Continuation School to avoid any further problems. Regardless of Veronica's own personal and school issues, her and Rachel Kaster were great friends, from all accounts, always remaining close, as well as Rachel's younger brother Eddie. The three got along great. So on the night of April 13th, when that Friday came up, going to golf and stuff for the evening seemed like nothing but a good time for the young teens to enjoy themselves. Gary Kaster dropped the kids off in the parking lot at Golf and Stuff. The exact details of what the three kids did within Golf and Stuff, or reports or sightings of the kids initially within the park, is unknown. But what is known and seen by multiple eyewitnesses is that later on that night, at around 10 p.m., just in front of the arcade and entertainment center, 15-year-old Eddie Kaster stumbled and dragged and crawled his way across the parking lot while he desperately clutched onto his neck. When he finally made it to the sidewalk in front of the property, Eddie was frantically holding on and pointing to his throat. When a security guard approached him, the boy reached his hands out and said, "Help me." And when he finally collapsed to the ground, to the shock and dismay of onlookers who couldn't believe the sight, Eddie, once collapsed, was revealed that his throat was fully slit, nearly ear to ear.
Before everything went down, this is actually where I parked, and I remember this spot because this is where the teenage boy collapsed.
The teenage boy collapsed here?
Right here. There was a girl, I think her name was Tracy, that worked here, and I believe he went to grab her, and that's when his throat just opened up.
Oh my lord.
And he collapsed here, and this is, I guess, where he died. But
wow,
this,
right here, right in front of the entrance.
Yeah, right in front of the entrance, and this is where we all knew everything.
Yeah.
I was standing right there when I seen it happen.
So what did you initially think when you first saw it? You thought it was a gag or something?
No,
or what was going through your mind?
Thought it was a fight. There was lots of fights here.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a fight because all I remember seeing is the kid coming down to his knees. I remember the girl, and she just screamed.
The security guard and a couple onlookers rushed to help and aid him by grabbing towels and applying them to Eddie's neck. With not much they could do besides be patient till EMTs arrived, they waited with the young boy, trying their best to comfort him. It was said that a couple onlookers even knelt down beside young Eddie and held him and prayed for him in what would eventually be his final moments on earth. It was shown that young Eddie had crawled and dragged his way out of the riverbed adjacent to the property. He crawled up a steep bank, down the sidewalk, and across the Golf and Stuff parking lot, where he eventually collapsed on the sidewalk in front of the entertainment center. Both Veronica and Rachel were found under the bridge in the riverbed of the San Gabriel River, which is right behind the Golf and Stuff property. Veronica had a stab wound directly in her back, and Rachel had multiple slashes all across her body. All three kids would be pronounced dead before 12 p.m., just minutes before Gary Kaster would pull back into the parking lot to pick up the three, just as initially planned earlier, only for him to find the unfolding horror of the crime scene in front of him. The brutal and shocking scene was unbelievable to many, and to those who had witnessed Eddie Kaster, they had no idea of the severity of the situation, with eyewitness testimony of a cashier working at the moment telling the LA Times newspaper back in 1984, and I quote, "People came over and told me there was some sort of fight. I thought the boy was choking on something. He was stumbling and pointing at his neck." End quote. Most people at the scene that night had no clue that just a couple hundred yards away lay two more bodies, in that of Rachel and Veronica, lying at the bottom of the ditch embankment. The common thought of eyewitness accounts was that they believed just a fight had occurred in the parking lot, something not too uncommon in those days, and someone had just been slightly injured in the scuffle. But as Gary Kaster began speaking to the police and detectives on the scene, he would learn the tragic news that this was no ordinary teenage fight that took place. This was a triple homicide investigation, and both his children were gone, alongside their friend Veronica. All three children were taken to the hospital, but pronounced dead minutes upon arrival. Crime scene investigators worked through the entire night, scouring the scene of the riverbed and interviewing all witnesses within the property. The riverbed behind Golf and Stuff was a popular area for teens and other young adults to drink or smoke, getting away from the pryful eyes of the street. It's somewhere a bit more private and secluded. It was also used by cyclists and joggers frequently, but mostly during the daytime. It also had its fair share of transient and homeless individuals who would frequent through the area. Detectives would canvass a large segment of the riverbed, and to their surprise, they found nothing, no clues, no weapon, no real evidence, nothing of significance. Investigators had no idea why the three kids were in the riverbed to begin with, whether they had gone down there of their own volition or whether they had been forced down there. Sergeant Barry Jones, one of the investigators, said that there were no reports of a fight involving the three Friday night, and that there were no signs of a struggle underneath the bridge. He told the LA Times newspaper back in 1984, and I quote, "We have absolutely no leads at the moment. Absolutely none." End quote. In the following days, as police and detectives would continue working the case to establish some sort of potential lead, autopsies would be performed on the three teens. Findings concluded that all three had succumbed to vital organ damage and blood loss as a result of the brutal attack. Surprisingly, traces of alcohol had been found in their bodies, suggesting that the three teens had been drinking in the ditch shortly before the attack took place. This finding of alcohol in their system added a new layer to the investigation. The commonly believed theory was that Rachel, Veronica, and Eddie, once arriving at the Golf and Stuff property after Gary Kaster had dropped them off, would eventually leave the park and walk across the bridge to Lewis's liquor store, a known spot at the time that would not card or ask for ID when buying alcohol, making it a popular spot with the teenagers of the time to go to. Whether the three had encountered someone on their way over the bridge or on their way back, it's unknown. But what we do know is that all three teens would eventually make their way down the embankment and under the bridge. Logistics-wise, detectives and theorists to this day surmise that for one individual to have been able to pull off the attack on all three teenagers, it would have been virtually impossible, considering that the attacker would have been able to neutralize all three victims before any could have escaped or ran back up the embankment for help. 15-year-old Eddie Kaster was found with his throat slit, with no defensive wounds, so evidence would suggest that Eddie was either snuck up on from behind or held hostage at knife point before the killing. Veronica Flores had been found with a stab wound directly in her back. Evidence would suggest that she was attempting to flee or run away from her attacker, but had been chased down and stabbed from behind. And Eddie's sister, Rachel Kaster, was found with multiple deep slashes across the front of her body, with defensive-like wounds where she attempted to block or shield herself from the slashing. With so much carnage in such a quick amount of time, it was hard to believe a single individual could be responsible. But for police, they had no real idea either way. All was speculation at that point. A stabbing is typically associated as a very personal crime to commit. There is no detachment between the attacker and the victim. It's a very personal way of killing and typically involves extreme rage or hate psychologically towards the victim. But in this scenario, what could have motivated someone to go as far as to brutally murder 3 teenagers? As stated before, from all accounts, Rachel and Eddie Kaster were not known to have any real issues or problems with anybody in their personal lives or at their school. No real enemies to account for. But Veronica, on the other hand, she had her fair share of individuals that were intent on making her life miserable. She had even recently, 2 days before her murder, gotten into a physical altercation with a boy and a girl from Southgate High. The cause again was never fully known, but Veronica still had a mark on her face from the fight 2 days earlier when her body was eventually found in the ditch. But truly, could these other teens really have hated her that much to do something of this nature? Would they have really gone this far? Detectives had no real clue or idea as to what had happened. For all they knew, a transient could have stumbled upon the 3 teens drinking in the ditch late at night and attacked them for whatever reason. It was all unclear. One of the most sensational, but not out of question theories, was that of the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, being potentially responsible for the killings. Considering the time period from April 1984 to August of 1985, Ramirez was proven to have murdered at least 14 people and injured at least 25 during his activity, with various break-ins, beatings, and assaults. His crimes usually took place late in the afternoon or in the middle of the night, up and down the state of California. In 2009, detectives would eventually link Ramirez to the killing of May Leung in San Francisco on the night of April 10th, 1984, which took place exactly 3 days before the Kaster Flores case. Ramirez was well known to travel the state, canvassing for his next potential victims. Could the 3 teens have potentially crossed paths with this monster? Veronica's family had wondered if it was Richard Ramirez as the person responsible for the 3 teen slashing. Norwalk and Downey detectives never really thought of the idea, but they had never really carefully checked or vetted to see if Ramirez could have been involved. Detectives decided to take another look at the case in 2009. They collected DNA from the evidence of the original crime scene, which they had believed belonged to someone other than the 3 teenagers that night. They ran the DNA through a federal database of criminals, and after reviewing the findings, they had no hits, meaning the samples had no correspondence to any known criminals or individuals within the system, virtually putting an end to the Richard Ramirez angle, considering the lack of DNA evidence. Such a heinous crime committed to 3 unsuspecting teens who had their whole lives ahead of them. Police came to a dead end with no leads as to who was responsible. Still, with investigators having no idea where to begin, another one of the darker and wilder theories presented during the investigation of the slashing that night of April 13th was that of Satanism and the occult. When Norwalk and Downey PD detectives arrived at the scene that night, under the bridge outside of Golf and Stuff, multiple reports of finding pentagrams spray painted along the ditch near the teens' bodies. Along with that, they found the mutilated corpses of frogs and toads whose heads and body parts were impaled along a chain link fence in the ditch. And finally, the date that the attacks took place was Friday the 13th. Apart from the title of the classic horror movie, Friday the 13th holds significant importance in the world of the occult. In pagan times, Friday the 13th was considered the day of the goddess. It was considered a day to honor the divine feminine that lives in all of us, and to honor the cycles of creation, death, and rebirth. Also, with the mid-80s in America being at the height of the satanic panic hysteria of the time, many had believed the theory and saw the validity. But as investigators continued to work the case, no real evidence or connection to the occult ever presented itself. Investigators were truly left grasping at straws. One of the more interesting and vile incidents that took place was in the days after the attack at a church service. Following the deaths, a carload of teenagers drove by the procession slowly with their windows open. The kids inside the car were laughing and jovial as they yelled and shouted that Veronica had deserved to die. Veronica's older sister, Sandy Elliker, told the Downey Beat newspaper, and I quote, "I wanted to get in the car and chase after them. I was thinking, can you just back off for a little bit? Please, just back off. My sister is dead." End quote. Sandy Elliker is Veronica Flores' older sister by 7 years. She also told the newspaper that sometimes she wished her family had been more outgoing with the media in the first few days after the incident. She remembered telling the detectives all about the mean and cruel things kids had been doing to her sister at school, but she recounts the detectives just told her to go away. She said, and I quote, "I think at that time it was unthinkable that kids could do this to another kid," she recalled. "These days, I don't think detectives would be surprised if something like that could happen." End quote. Could teenagers possibly be responsible for such a heinous attack on other teens? Again, besides the vile behavior from the kids mocking the death of Veronica, investigators still had no evidence or eyewitnesses to form a real lead. With so many unknowns to this case, rumors would continue to fly till this day, with discussions on online forums such as Reddit going over the case with different angles even till now. On April 19th of 2009, the detective who had been handling the case, Paul Mundry, posted a message on a Facebook page dedicated to solving the murders. He said, and I quote, "I see so many caring people posting here. It is an incredible tragedy. Even more tragic is the fact that all the people present that night, not one, even with the passage of time, has been touched by their maker to come forward and tell the story of what they saw. Their silence, tragically, is evil as well." End quote. A Facebook group to honor and inform people about the case was formed by Veronica's sister and is still active to this day, posting birthday tributes and messages on anniversaries. Others regularly comment and like and share with messages sharing their own memories of Rachel, Eddie, and Veronica, and how they truly missed the three teens. A heartfelt message was posted on the memorial page. A heartfelt message was posted on the memorial page in April of 2024. It read, and I quote, "When we think of 1984, it doesn't seem that long ago. I can remember that year, that month, that day, that night. The days follow very clearly. How can it be 40 years? I can remember thinking I just wanted to get through the days. I couldn't fathom how life would go on. How did life suddenly become so lonely? So many people in this world, and ours came crashing down in a mere matter of minutes. Two families, forever connected. How could no one know anything, not one person, to come forward and give us the information needed? So many stories, so many theories. There is someone out there to blame. I know you are out there. Everyone on this page was affected in some way by this tragedy, by this loss. Even after 40 years, 40 fucking years, we still feel this pain every day. Rachel, Eddie, and Veronica, not a day goes by that you are not thought of with so much love. You are not forgotten. I hear your stories about school, ditching school, friends, concerts, journey, and parties, complaining about parents, talking shit, playing jokes on each other, celebrating birthdays and holidays, talking about the future. I only had a short time with you, but my memories have and will carry me through until we see each other again." End quote. It's a truly painful reminder that these cold cases leave a scar on loved ones, the never knowing or peace of mind of being given an answer. And still to this day, this case remains open. No closer to finding answers now than they were the night it had happened. And as time goes on, hopefully a light can be shined upon this case. Someone out there knows something. Someone out there heard something. Only time will tell if a person can grow a conscience and come forward. If you or anyone you know has any information whatsoever that could help in this case, please contact Norwalk or Downey PD. If you'd like to follow and share your thoughts or condolences to the families of Veronica, Rachel, and Eddie, please follow the Rachel Kaster, Eddie Kaster, and Veronica Flores Facebook memorial page. And alright guys, that about wraps it up for episode 10, the Golf and Stuff Murders, the Kaster and Flores case. And guys, I want to thank you if you happen to listen to this all the way to the end, or you watched this on the YouTube channel all the way to the end. Thank you so much. Again, this case, guys, was very interesting. It's very tragic, and I want to express my condolences, really, to the Flores family and to the Kaster family. After reading those Facebook messages and those posts, guys, you could truly see how this leaves a scar and an open wound on the family of these individuals. And it's not just a story to read. There's real individuals being affected. So truly, my condolences to all parties involved. And guys, if you'd like to express your condolences or have a message, like I said earlier, please follow, join that Facebook group. They post very touching messages frequently. And yeah, guys, thank you so much. Again, if you listen to the end, I really appreciate it. And if you happen to like, share, comment, any interaction with this content helps a lot. So thank you guys so much. Have a good one.